Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. And so Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Welcome back, everyone, to Clarity from Chaos. On this episode, we're going to tackle, once again, the ongoing effort by the so-called elites in this country to divide us. If it's not trying to shame us because of our opinion, it's trying to divide us by our skin color. All of this is just a matter of manipulation to control us. To lead the discussion, we welcome back Christian Watson. Christian is a political commentator, national spokesperson for Color Us United, and the host of the Pensive Politics podcast and his own YouTube channel. Welcome back, Christian.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, since we last spoke, the Supreme Court overturned the affirmative action. So what are your thoughts? Because I'm sure everybody's just going crazy over this.
They are. I think that the court did a half measure that was much needed, but I think that it didn't go far enough. Here's what I mean by that. So in the Gretter case in 2003, there was this standard called strict scrutiny, which is basically what universities had to prove in order to implement affirmative action programs into their educational institutions. And Senator Day O'Connor, who wrote the majority opinion for that case, as I recall it, said that if you can demonstrate an educational benefit from having racial diversity, you have met strict scrutiny. Well, in this case, UNC and Harvard, the two plaintiffs, couldn't really demonstrate an educational benefit to having racial diversity over any other kind of diversity. And Justice Thomas actually made it at this point quite clear in his brilliant concurrence to the majority opinion. And so they didn't meet strict scrutiny. So strict scrutiny just got a lot higher, got a lot more difficult to meet, which practically makes it almost nigh impossible for institutions to implement affirmative action in their universities. Having said that, it's not impossible. In my opinion, I think the court should have struck it down on principle. The fact that it does violate the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause, and that right. There is no workaround for that. If the Constitution says something, it says something. There's no exception. There's no workaround. This is what happens when you have moral convictions. You have a clarity about these issues that allows you to order the law in the proper way. But unfortunately, this court took a half measure and didn't assert what I believe was the spirit of Thomas's concurrence, which was a complete and utter abolition of affirmative action in American educational institutions and the affirmation of the Constitution's colorblind nature, which is what we should really be focusing on when it comes to this issue of race in the legal system.
Yeah, I think, to your point, the half measure was probably, and I hate to say it, due to a lot of the politics of the day, is the reason. Yes. The reason that they, didn't go, full Monty on this thing, which is what they should have done. So my next question is, I would imagine that the plaintiffs are scurrilously working, trying to figure out workarounds around this.
Oh, yeah, and even when
because of your point that they only went halfway with it.
Absolutely, but not only that, but I genuinely believe that even if affirmative action had been completely and utterly destroyed, the culture that created affirmative action still lives quite loudly in the universities. Yeah. And that is something that we cannot avoid. There are still going to be diversity seminars. There are still going to be entire centers where certain people that have different colors, like white folks, are excluded from going into multiculturalism, as they call them. There's still going to be all these kind of programs that preach a kind of race Marxism that goes against anything that has to do with genuine educational benefit. So really, in my opinion, this ruling was not supposed to be about changing the culture. And I ultimately do not believe this ruling will change the culture. I do believe that this ruling may embolden good-natured people who want education to be about refining man and the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of truth. I believe it will motivate them to hopefully plant some seeds in the university environment that may sprout up and one day overtake the poison that has infected American higher education. So that's my hope. That is my ultimate ambition, because I understand that government action, government edict is not going to change the hearts of man. It's not going to change the condition of our society. It can simply perhaps lessen the effect of bad ideas that have taken root through policy, like affirmative action, but it can't get rid of bad ideas entirely.
No, but they should be promoting justice across the board. They shouldn't just be singling out one versus the other. And that
I agree.
seems to,
Hmm.
yeah, and that seems to be, the entire idea around all of this.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that gets me, Christian, to the bigger question. Why is the black community so convinced that Democrats have got their back? I can't put my head around, historically or any other way, why a whole group of people feel like the Democrats are our savior. I just don't understand it.
Well, I must say that over the past few election cycles, we have seen a slight shift, particularly in the orientations of black men towards the conservative side. So there definitely is a movement going on that is trying to convince African Americans of the other political ideologies that are out there, and are trying to educate them more about the nature of our political system. I think those we should support those. But more importantly than that, I think we have to understand that most people don't think about politics in the proper way, whether they're Democrat or Republican. Most folks don't consider politics philosophically. Most folks don't really evaluate the premises of the ideas that they hold dear and believe in.
Right.
Most
I
folks
agree.
simply go ahead and I see this on my Twitter. People have positions, not worldviews. It's
Right.
very easy to have a position on any given issue, but
Yep.
your position is not going to be secure if there's not a foundation to it. A worldview is the first principles from which everything should flow. Your positions should come after your worldview, not before. The cart should not go before the horse, so to speak. So we have to really talk about worldviews. Let's talk about values. Let's talk about first principles. Let's talk about all those things. If we're going to reach anybody, forget if they're black or whatever, we're going to reach anybody that seems to be captured by a particular political institution. And when our discussion moves towards worldviews, and the level of discourse is raised significantly to the point that people are having to critically ask themselves, why do I believe this? What is the implications of this idea? Hey, what does it mean to have good governance? Hey, what is justice? Hey, what is truth? When these kind of questions fall upon the mind of man, there are a few possibilities that can result from this. You can either have some people become uncomfortable and shut down and not engage in the discourse any longer. A lot of folks will probably do that. You can have people who are fascinated by the idea and go down the rabbit hole and follow it to wherever it may lead. It may lead to them becoming people who believe in incredibly fringe stuff that makes no sense. It can lead to them becoming more enlightened and informed voters who are more centrist. It can lead into 10,000 different directions. But the point is, it will lead somewhere that is different from where they are, and they'll probably be more informed at the conclusion of their intellectual journey than they were at the beginning of their intellectual journey, or to cause propagandists to use this new focus on thinking to push their own ideas and to try to indoctrinate people even harder. There are plenty of pathways, plenty of ways a more thinking populace can be a perhaps more endangered populace. But we know for certain that a populace that does not think is in perpetual danger and is at the hand of tyrants in perpetuity. So, even though a thinking populace can still go down the wrong path, I would much prefer, as Jefferson said, newspapers without the government as opposed to government without the newspapers, because that's post enlightenment is the precondition for civilized society. And so, short answer is most people don't really critically examine the politics. I think most Black Americans are in this boat. Most Americans in general are in this boat, and that makes them susceptible to institutional capture.
Yeah, and that's very much where we're at, because I think we've become completely, to your point, untethered from the founding of this country. And, religion plays a big part of that, but we are completely untethered now ever since they pulled prayer out of the schools and everything else. And I think being untethered and than not having any kind of worldview or any kind of curiosity to start to drive that back to a baseline is kind of where we're at, because the manipulation is constant. I mean, the media is constantly beating that drum.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I could entirely agree with you. In fact, the current corporate media environment relies entirely on people having positions and not worldviews. Because if more people had worldviews, less people would watch the corporate media. More people would have the confidence to seek out their own ideas and to establish their own ideas with their powers of reason, gifted to them naturally by the creator, as opposed to seeking validation in external sources. The media is a great source of validation for many people who have many different political stripes. So I
Yep.
think that really, again, a thinking populace is a danger to the sacred cows of our current era. And those sacred cows are perhaps the primary reason why, and I contend this, why people have gone down the wrong path in terms of who they support politically, because many of them cannot even justify who they support politically. Many of them cannot even justify why they believe what they believe. Many of them cannot even justify the fundamental concepts that go into forming politics or a political union, like a nation. Many people can't really justify those things. We have to
Right.
get to a point, and this is why I constantly say on my show, I'm trying to lead a revolution of the mind. I'm trying to lead a revolution that will return philosophic thinking and first principles based belief back to the American people. And I view this as a great undertaking because it's not going to be easy. There's a lot of different forces, but the payout will be tremendous for future generations and the health of our society and generally the health of humanity.
Right. And I would agree. And I think, the whole, I guess for the lack of a better term, the whole foobar on the way the educational system is rolled out is right there at the top, because,
Mm-hmm.
things that we're talking about between you and I right now, civil discourse, just about anything that has to do with relationships to politics to worldview, none of that's taught anymore. I mean, you could query just. I mean, all you have to do is watch the news and have these little men on the streets when they ask somebody who which war was the first one that gave us the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and they sit there and say the Spanish American War. They have no clue about history or any of the issues or things that have brought us to where we're at today.
A lot of people don't. You're absolutely right about that. But even people who are dedicated politicos who do have these conversations, many of them never check their own worldviews. I've had a lot of conversations with very educated, highly educated people who are involved in politics. And when I ask them a question about the premise of their ideology, I oftentimes see deer in the headlights. Not because they're not capable, of course they are. They're very smart people, but because they have inherited a world in which they are not really asked to question why they believe what they believe. And if they get to a point in their career where what they believe is deeply tethered to what they're doing in life, their money, then they don't have an incentive really to not to think more. They have an incentive to do the exact opposite. So
Right.
we have to be very careful with the kind of world that we have that oftentimes tethers incentives to certain types of behavior that may not be healthy in the long run. So it will benefit everybody, not just people that are ignorant generally, but people who are knowledgeable to
Right.
really
Well,
engage in some philosophy and really
right. Well,
understand what's going on.
yeah, we just went through 2 years of manipulation over the destruction of critical thinking with the whole COVID-19, because people that had questions that were critically not engaged with the COVID-19 and everything else, they were shamed into silence. They were canceled. They were all kinds of things. So we just came through a period of squashing critical thinking, and I'm just wondering when it's going to come back to a certain extent, because it just seems like people are just going along.
Well, I'm no Nostradamus, but I do believe, and deep in my heart, that if we can plant the seeds for evolution of the mind in this nation, we can have a cultural revival sooner than we think we will. But again, that's going to require some of the major voices that we listen to, where we get our news from, and the influencers. It's going to require them to be on board or it's going to require a new crop of influencers to come up. That's what I'm trying to do, to come up from the ground and attempt to imprint this more thoughtful perspective on our culture. I mean, just think 60 years ago, William F. Buckley, what he was doing every night on
Oh my
firing
goodness.
line, what he
Oh
was
my.
doing, it was absolutely brilliant. And there were
Right.
people of all walks of life who tuned in the firing line and just watched him. You didn't have to be a PhD to watch firing line. Even regular folks did it. And he really raised level of political discourse. And not only did he do that, but he literally shaped the philosophy of American conservatism. Still up until this day, I would argue, though, there's forces that are trying to pull away from the more Buckleyite conservatism and embrace a more communitarian, pre-Enlightenment kind of conservatism called post-liberalism. There's that, but still, up until this era, the Buckley, the Goldwaters, was translated into Reagan eventually, was translated into almost a decade of American prosperity. That's what a revolution of the mind can look like in 2023 or in this century. And I hope to lead it, not because I'm being presumptuous, it's because I don't see a lot of people out there doing it. I see a lot of people out there just being angry. I see people out there trying to stir up rage. I see people out there trying to rely on ignorance to make a political point. I see a lot of people out there trying to engage in blood sports as opposed to showing goodwill towards their fellow interlocutor. I see a lot of things that shouldn't be so. So we got to change it.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me into the next question about what needs to be done. Obviously we need to, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to happen, Christian, how we're going to infiltrate the mega media empires and install, other than yourself, with some kind of a grassroots effort, install another William F. Buckley or somebody out there that can start to articulate and drive the conversation where it needs to go. Because you listen to any of the cable news channels or anything else, I mean, it's a desert relative to intellectual conversation, just a complete desert.
The best thing is we don't need the corporate media empire anymore.
Right.
New media has supplanted them. It has overthrown them from their thrones of authority. And now you have YouTubers and Rumble users and Odyssey users getting more views on average than CNN gets in an entire day. That's
Sure.
ridiculous. You got Tucker Carlson on Twitter, basically an ironclad, bulletproof platform, who's getting more views than he ever got, I think, even on Fox News.
Sure.
I mean, so you don't need the corporate media empire anymore. Buckley
No.
can rise up in this new media environment and be very, very effective. I mean, think of Joe Rogan and think of Joe Rogan's impact in the world. And he's just a random UFC announcer guy who speaks and smokes weed on his podcast. And think of how many people would consider Joe Rogan more credible than they would Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow. More people know about Joe Rogan than Sean Hannity or Rachel Maddow. He is almost universally famous. If someone like that if we had like a Buckley figure like that who got up in that position, that'd be great, And so, but it's going to take creating the environment for it, because right now the political culture in our nation, I think, would reject a Buckley because of the approach that it would take. The very
they sure wouldn't know what to do with them.
No, absolutely not. But we have to change that, and we can change that by modeling good behavior in front of other people.
Right. Yeah, they absolutely they would go into continuous meltdown with a Buckley if Buckley was on now.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
because there isn't anybody out there that could even come close to even holding a conversation with Buckley.
Yep.
I mean, he would absolutely destroy them verbally before they could even open their mouths. So, so it would be interesting. So, I think the other thing is that I'm wondering is, do we need to start to shift our role models, Christian? The role models that we continually put in front of ourselves or have people put in front of us are not the role models that we need to have out there. I mean, we need the Ben Carsons, we need the Clarence Thomases. We need people that have actually walked the walk, to bring everybody up. And I don't understand why we don't get that.
Well, I think that So I do think that we need to model certain kinds of behavior in front of people, right? People will
Right.
respond to what they see, and a behavior that is long persisted in habituation will ultimately become the norm. This is how it happens in almost every civilization. But one group of people does something, and it spreads like wildfire, and it becomes the norm. And norms establish the character of society. So if you think about it, if the origin of society begins in individual action, then it continues in habituation, and then it finalizes in the norms. And the norms of our modern age right now are in no short order. Intellectual mediocrity in the name of tribalist victory. The norms of our modern age right now, in no short order, are, for example, being very condensed and very short with your arguments so as to sacrifice depth in the name of concision. The norms of our modern age right now are to accept a set of sources that have been shown to be prone to media manipulation, that have shown to be prone to government manipulation over the past 60, 70 years, accept them as gospel truth because someone somewhere some time ago said that CBS or CNN or whatever other news organization was credible. That the norms
Right.
of our age right now are defining the character of our age, and they also are a good mirror or window into the future of our civilization if they persist. So we have to, again, look at these things very closely, identify them, and then very simply fight them. How do you fight, for example, the fact that corporate media is seen as legitimate? Will undermine their legitimacy. How do you do that? Very simply, start a podcast, start a Rumble channel, a YouTube channel, do that kind of stuff. Seriously, no, I mean that's how you do it. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. And a lot of folks are like, well, I don't have a voice. I'm smart enough. Well, frankly, it doesn't really care how smart you think you are, or how smart you are. If you can speak a message and speak it with passion, and you can get an audience, you can have an impact.
Right.
So that's one thing you can do. If you want to disrupt the fact that tribalism is the current song of our era, then don't be a tribalist. Model behavior that is non-tribalist in front of people. And hopefully, as time goes on and habituation persists, they will be able to appreciate you for what you are and appreciate your approach for what it is. Again, there's just a lot of things we can do in our individual capacity that can really help hasten along the revolution of the mind and the liberation from mediocrity. But we have to be willing to do them.
Yeah. Amen. So where can people find your YouTube channel?
Yep, you just go on YouTube and type in Christian Watson Politics. You can also go on my Twitter, which is going to be @officialcwatson, and all my information is there.
Ah, terrific. And then obviously your podcast, Pensive Politics.
Yep, same thing.
They can go find it on what, Apple and the typical
Apple, Rumble,
channels, all the typical channels. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've been talking to Christian Watson, who's a political commentator, national spokesperson for Colorists United, and the host of Pensive Politics, and obviously the Christian Watson YouTube channel. So again, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you again, Christian.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
You too.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.